This is CNY Decides from WAER and Central Current. I'm Bob Beck. Each week on this show, we'll delve into issues and topics we're following this election season. Joining me now is Central Current's Patrick McCarthy, who has written about the District 22 congressional race that includes the incumbent John Mannion, Republican Kailee, and the independent Will Staton, and whether the Democrats might hold it for a while. Well, Patrick, first off, thanks for joining us. Lots of interesting things about this particular race. You know, you look at pundits, they're all saying John Mannion's going to come away the big winner here. You look at the registration, certainly Democrats have a huge edge, but why does Kailee think this is a race she can win?
Yeah, Bob, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Yes, you're right. Redistricting efforts have granted Democrats about a 30,000 voter advantage in the district. And, of course, the president is polling at around a 60% disapproval rating nationwide, as well as in New York. So Democrats might look at that and say, this is going to be an easy path to re-election for John Mannion. Now, Kailee left Donald Trump's Department of Agriculture in February, and in March challenged Mannion. She's energized and sees this as a very viable race, and she believes that this is going to be the same battleground that Central New Yorkers have become accustomed to in the last 2 decades of midterm elections. So Buller looks at a sizable amount of registered independents in the district. We have about 100,000 independents. So she's hoping to energize the Republican base, not necessarily off of her Trump connections, but through her commitment to food affordability and meeting what she calls the missing middle. So Buller thinks that she has a great shot at challenging Mannion by bringing out Republicans and peeling off enough independents, hoping that some independents may be looking to Albany, not Washington, and express their disapproval of Governor Kathy Hochul, who will be on the top of the ticket. So Buller sees the math there for her and thinks that this is going to be much more of a battle than the national pundits have assessed it.
Did she get John Mannion's attention?
Certainly. When I spoke with John Mannion, he was well aware that Buller had entered this race, and regardless of the analysis from groups like Cook Political Report and 538, who have marked this race as a solid blue race and predicted that Mannion will easily win re-election, Mannion pointed to his own party, which marked the race as what they call a frontline race. He told me he very much perceives the race as a battleground, and he's also getting ready to roll up his sleeves and take on this race with all of his energy. That's what he's telling me. So,
a lot of times incumbents have negatives. They've voted the wrong way on some things. People perceive them as too liberal or any kind of things like that. Does Mannion have negatives that anybody's pointing to?
Sure. I mean, I think that, Kailee Buller may try to frame Mannion, who's, framed himself as a fighter and an opponent of President Donald Trump and much of the actions that congressional Republicans are taking on Trump's behalf. A candidate like Buller may be able to seize on some of those moments and present Mannion as, a far left or a progressive Democrat. Ironically, the far left and progressive Democrats could easily look at Mannion and accuse him of moderating or of not going far enough. And I think John Mannion will tell you that that is what New York 22 is, and that is the district that he represents. He's long called himself and characterized himself a moderate Democrat, and that's how much of the nation characterizes and perceives him. And I think that Mannion will likely be able to welcome those criticisms, and I guess most of them probably won't stick because, again, I think that he has positioned himself in line with what the voters of the district tend to express at the ballot box.
You referenced independents that are voters out there a second ago. Give the folks a sense of what we're talking about here. There are an awful lot of people that don't choose a side.
Sure. So although the Democrats and the redistricting efforts granted the Democrats a 30,000 voter advantage, the other voting bloc that matters here is the around 100,000 registered independents within the district. So registered independents now make up about a third of the total voters registered in New York 22. So Kailee Buller sees that she has a disadvantage within party registration, but sees this pool of voters that she hopes to, only peel off a percentage of to be able to get her above, that Democratic advantage.
How's our independent candidate going to do here, and what, can he muck up the race at all, do you think?
Sure. So, I sat with Will Staton, the independent who's seeking to challenge Buller and Mannion. I also interviewed Luke Perry, a political science and a professor of political science at Utica University. Perry says that in other races, especially in a non-midterm election, in a national scene that isn't so polarized, then Staton might have real inroads to make in a district that has such a sizable block of independents. But Perry says, in a year when the nation is so polarized, when voters of each party feel that they are headed to the ballot box to decide the future of the nation, he feels that any independent, regardless of their name or their positions, is just a non-starter because the main two parties and their voters perceive this as a litmus test on the party in power.
I want to go back to Buller, and just before we leave that topic, going back to her ag background, just the fact that she is in the ag business, I have found that ag candidates over the years can do real well, and because people really will focus on voting for somebody that represents their interests. Will that help her, do you think?
It's an interesting question, and there's a lot of things at play here, and that Buller, in my conversation with her, seems to very earnestly care about, what she calls the missing middle. So she spent much of her career in the food industry and is, concerned with providing healthy, affordable food to average Americans. Where that gets complicated, so that's a message that can really connect with farmers in New York, right? But where that gets complicated is a lot of people who are struggling with affordability right now and look at the president and, who ran on lowering costs. And, most people say that they're struggling with rising costs. So, I posed that to Buller. She pointed out, that her individual efforts at the ag department, one thing she focused on was lowering the cost of beef, right? So there are sort of, particular things that she could point to that she has accomplished, but the average voter might just take a broader view of it and say, right, I'm struggling to afford everything, and that party's in power, and blame that party regardless of her individual resume or work experience.
End of the day, isn't this just going to be about Trump?
And that's where Buller will say it's just as much about Governor Kathy Hochul as it is about Trump, at least in New York 22. So this is really interesting. And, most midterm elections are treated by American voters as a sort of benchmark on the party in power. So historically, the president's party struggles in midterm elections. In 18 out of the last 20 midterm elections, the president's party has lost seats in the House of Representatives. When the president has a negative approval rating, such as Donald Trump does right now, in 20 out of 20 midterm elections, that president's party has lost a lot of seats in the House. So that doesn't bode well. Now, Buller points to someone who's actually on the ballot, and that's Governor Kathy Hochul. And Buller feels that local disapproval with Hochul can sort of counteract some of that negative sentiment about Trump. So as much as voters maybe, Democrats might be taking to the polls to punish Donald Trump's party, Buller's hoping that Republicans are going to be energized to punish the governor and hopefully flip, that office.
So if it's close, it'll be that reason.
I couldn't say, but that, that's Buller's math there and her perception that, that's why she sees the race as viable. And Luke Perry, our political science expert, would say that, that he made no mention of Hochul, and he does think that this is going to be about Trump and Republicans, and he doesn't think that they necessarily have a strong record to run on right now.
Patrick McCarthy, thank you so much. Patrick again with Central Current. CNY Decides is a joint effort by Central Current and WAER.